I'm Emma Kennedy, 29, and last year my own sister banned me from her wedding at a French chateau. We think it's best if you don't come. You might be a distraction, read the text that shattered my heart. Growing up as the overlooked middle child with a jealous sister and parents who always took her side prepared me for disappointment, but never this level of rejection. What I never expected was how this painful uninvitation would lead to the most transformative moment of my life in front of the Eiffel Tower. Before I tell you how my sister's wedding ban led to my unexpected viral moment, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever dealt with family drama that cut deep. Trust me, this story has a twist even I couldn't have imagined. Growing up in our colonial-style home in Greenwich, Connecticut, family dynamics were established early. Madison, my older sister by 3 years, was the golden child from day one. Everything she touched seemed to turn to gold: perfect grades, student council president, prom queen. My parents attended every debate competition, tennis match, and academic ceremony, beaming with pride at their firstborn's achievements. I, on the other hand, was the quiet middle child. Not problematic enough to demand attention like our younger brother Tyler, not exceptional enough to earn the spotlight like Madison. I found refuge in art classes and books, developing a rich inner world where I didn't have to compete for anyone's approval. The tension between Madison and me began around my 14th birthday. I had a growth spurt, my braces came off, and suddenly strangers were complimenting my appearance. "You should be a model," they'd say, often right in front of Madison, whose competitive nature couldn't handle even this unintentional victory on my part. "Beauty fades," she'd snap whenever someone praised my looks. "I'm focusing on things that matter." My parents, uncomfortable with the shift in attention, often echoed Madison's sentiments. "Emma's pretty, but Madison's going places," my mother would say, as if the two were mutually exclusive. My father would nod along, though sometimes I'd catch a sympathetic glance from him when no one else was looking. I never wanted the attention my appearance sometimes brought. In fact, I often tried to downplay it, wearing loose clothes, minimal makeup, pulling my hair back. But Madison viewed my very existence as a threat, especially at family events where distant relatives would fuss over how I'd blossomed. After college, our paths diverged further. Madison pursued a high-powered career in marketing at a multinational corporation, complete with a corner office in Manhattan and a six-figure salary by age 27. I became an art teacher at a public middle school, a job I loved for the creativity and connection with students, though it didn't impress at family gatherings. "Still just teaching?" Madison would ask every Thanksgiving and Christmas, emphasizing the just with surgical precision. When Madison met Richard Beaumont at a charity gala 3 years ago, it seemed like the perfect addition to her carefully curated life. Richard came from old French money, worked in international finance, and had the kind of European sophistication that delighted our status-conscious parents. His family owned property throughout France, including a historic chateau in the Loire Valley. "We're thinking of a destination wedding," Madison announced at Easter dinner last year, flashing her 3-carat diamond engagement ring. "Richard's family chateau is just sitting there waiting to be used." Despite our strained relationship, I was genuinely happy for her and offered to help with planning. Perhaps naively, I thought this might be a chance for us to bond as sisters. Madison initially accepted my help with addressing invitations and researching French wedding traditions, though she dismissed most of my creative suggestions with a curt "that's not really what we're going for." As the months passed, I grew excited about visiting Paris for the first time. The wedding would be my first trip to Europe, and I'd saved for months to afford the flight and appropriate attire. I practiced basic French phrases, researched museums to visit, and dreamed of seeing the Eiffel Tower. 3 months before the wedding, another complication arose when my boyfriend Jake ended our 2-year relationship. "I just don't see a future with you," he said, adding cruelly, "You're beautiful, but there's not much depth beyond that." His words echoed the narrative I'd heard my whole life, and I couldn't help wondering if my family's perception of me had somehow influenced his. I didn't tell Madison about the breakup immediately, not wanting to distract from her wedding planning. When I finally mentioned it during a rare phone call about bridesmaid dresses, her response was telling. "That's unfortunate timing," she said without much sympathy. But please don't bring it up at the wedding. Richard's family is very traditional, and they might find it inappropriate to have a single bridesmaid. I assured her I wouldn't make my personal life an issue at her wedding. Little did I know that my single status would soon be the least of our concerns. The text message came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was helping my students prepare for the spring art show. My phone buzzed on my desk, and seeing Madison's name, I assumed it was another wedding detail to coordinate. After talking it over with Richard and our parents, we think it's best if you don't come to the wedding. You might be a distraction, and I want all the attention on me as the bride on my special day. I'm sure you understand. I read the message 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. My hands trembled as I excused myself from the classroom and stepped into the hallway to call Madison. "What do you mean I can't come to the wedding?" I asked when she answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm your sister. I've already bought my dress and plane ticket." "Look, Emma," Madison said with a sigh that suggested I was being difficult. "You know how it is. Everyone always comments on how you look. At my engagement party, Richard's uncle spent 10 minutes talking to you instead of congratulating us. He was asking about my art program at school," I protested. "I wasn't trying to." "It doesn't matter what you were trying to do," she interrupted. "The fact is, you're too pretty but not accomplished enough. It creates this whole uncomfortable dynamic where people pity me despite my success because you won the genetic lottery." Her words felt like physical blows. I slid down the wall to sit on the floor of the empty school corridor. "Mom and Dad agree with this?" I managed to ask. "They think it's for the best. Mom said she'll call you later." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence until the bell rang, forcing me to compose myself and return to my students. I made it through the remaining class period on autopilot, helping with papier-mâché techniques while feeling completely hollow inside. That evening, my mother called as promised. Instead of the support I desperately needed, she delivered another blow. "Sweetie, I know it seems harsh, but weddings are stressful. Madison has worked so hard for everything she has. Can't you just let her have her day without any complications?" "Complications? Mom, I'm her sister, not a complication," I said, my voice breaking. "You know how sensitive Madison is about these things. Remember her sweet 16 when Grandma kept saying how you were turning into such a beauty?" Madison cried for days. "That was 13 years ago. And not my fault." "Nobody's saying it's your fault, exactly," my mother hedged. "But we all need to be sensitive to Madison's feelings right now." When I called my father hoping for a different response, he sounded uncomfortable and distracted. "Dad, did you really agree to this?" I asked. "Your mother and Madison discussed it," he said vaguely. "I think everyone's a bit overwrought with wedding planning." "So you don't think I should be banned from my own sister's wedding?" There was a long pause. "I think it would be simpler for everyone if things proceeded as planned." "Simpler for everyone except me," I said bitterly. The next day, I called Madison again, determined to understand the true depth of her reasoning. The conversation quickly escalated. "Just admit it," I said after several minutes of circular arguments. "You've always been jealous of me for this one stupid thing I have no control over, while you have everything else: career, money, perfect fiancé, Mom and Dad's approval." "Jealous?" Madison laughed coldly. "Why would I be jealous of someone who peaked at 17 and will spend her life teaching finger painting while her looks slowly fade? My wedding photos will be timeless, Emma. They'll be in Richard's family archives for generations. Can you imagine future Beaumonts looking at the pictures and asking, 'Who's that beautiful woman?' and having to explain that it's just the bride's mediocre sister?" I hung up, unable to bear another word. The following day at school, I was arranging still life objects for my afternoon class when the reality of the situation hit me fully. Tears began streaming down my face just as my colleague Jasmine walked in with a stack of construction paper. "Emma." "What's wrong?" she asked, quickly closing the classroom door. Through sobs, I explained the situation. Jasmine listened with increasing outrage, handing me tissues and eventually a cup of strong coffee from her thermos. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, she declared when I'd finished. You need to go to Paris anyway. What? I can't crash the wedding. Not the wedding, Jasmine clarified. Paris. You've already got the time off approved and a plane ticket. Go to Paris and have an amazing time while they're all miserable in some stuffy chateau with your bridezilla sister. The idea seemed simultaneously rebellious and terrifying. I don't know. Emma, when was the last time you did something just for yourself? Without worrying about overshadowing your sister or disappointing your parents? I couldn't remember. That night, I sat in my small apartment staring at the flight confirmation email. The ticket was non-refundable anyway, a practical consideration that somehow made the decision feel less defiant. But the more I thought about it, the more Jasmine's suggestion resonated with something deeper inside me. Why shouldn't I go to Paris? Why was I always the one expected to diminish myself, to step aside, to understand everyone else's feelings while no one considered mine? I called Jasmine with my decision. I'm going, I said simply. Yes, she cheered. Operation Emma's Paris adventure is officially launched. Over the next few days, I assessed my finances. The flight and bridesmaid dress had already dented my savings, but I still had enough for a modest stay in Paris if I was careful. Jasmine helped me find a small apartment in Montmartre through a rental site, not fancy, but authentic and much cheaper than a hotel. The next hurdle was telling my family. I decided to be direct but non-confrontational, sending a group text to Madison and my parents. I've decided to still use my plane ticket to Paris. I respect your wishes and won't come to the wedding or chateau. I'll be staying in the city and doing some sightseeing on my own. I hope you have a beautiful day. The responses were predictably varied. Madison sent a curt whatever you think best that somehow managed to convey both annoyance and dismissal. My mother called immediately, alternating between warning me not to cause trouble and worrying about my safety as a woman traveling alone. My father's response surprised me, a private message with a link to a bank transfer. A little extra for your trip, he wrote. Paris deserves to be experienced properly. Just promise to stay away from the wedding as agreed. The amount wasn't huge, but the gesture made me cry, the first acknowledgement from any family member that I deserved something good too. With Jasmine's enthusiastic help, I began planning an alternative Paris experience. We created a Google map marking must-see locations, researched metro passes, and found free walking tours. As my excitement grew, I realized how long it had been since I'd looked forward to something without worrying about how others would perceive it. You need some new clothes, Jasmine declared one weekend, dragging me to a vintage store she loved. Stuff that actually shows off your figure instead of hiding it. I don't know, I hesitated, fingering a fitted emerald dress. I'm used to dressing down. For whom? Your sister isn't going to be there. This is your chance to be unapologetically yourself. Slowly, I began selecting pieces I'd always admired but never had the confidence to wear, a sundress with a fitted waist, tailored pants that actually hugged my curves, a silk blouse in a rich burgundy. Each item felt like a small act of rebellion against years of making myself smaller. The night before my departure, I carefully packed my suitcase, including the dress I'd originally planned to wear to the wedding, a simple blue slip dress that complemented my eyes. I wasn't sure why I was bringing it, but something told me I might need it. As the departure date approached, my determination wavered. The morning of my flight, I almost called the whole thing off. What was I trying to prove? Wouldn't it be easier to just stay home, lick my wounds, and avoid potential family fallout? With my suitcase by the door, I called Jasmine in a panic. I can't do this. It's too much. What if Madison's right and I'm just being vain and difficult? Emma Kennedy, Jasmine said firmly, you are the least vain person I know. You're going to Paris because you deserve a beautiful experience, not to spite anyone. Your sister uninvited you from her wedding because of jealousy, and your parents enabled it. Going anyway, but respecting their boundaries, is not an act of vanity. It's an act of self-respect. Hanging up, I took a deep breath, picked up my suitcase, and headed for the airport. Paris greeted me with a gentle spring rain that made the city gleam like it had been polished just for my arrival. From the cab window, I watched as elegant buildings and tree-lined boulevards slipped by, occasionally catching glimpses of the Seine. Despite my exhaustion from the overnight flight, I felt a flutter of excitement. I was really here, in Paris, by myself. My apartment in Montmartre was on the 5th floor of an old building with no elevator, a fact I became acutely aware of while lugging my suitcase up the narrow winding staircase. The space itself was tiny but charming, with a small balcony overlooking a courtyard, worn wooden floors, and simple furniture. After the property manager left, I stood alone in the silent apartment, suddenly aware of how alone I truly was. I unpacked my few belongings and took a quick shower to wash away the travel grime. Just as I was considering whether to nap or venture out for food, my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. FYI, the rehearsal dinner is at Chateau Beaumont tomorrow night, and the ceremony is Saturday at 3 p.m. Please respect our wishes and stay away from both venues. The Beaumont family has private security. The message stung like alcohol on an open wound. Not only was I uninvited, but now I was being treated like a potential wedding crasher who needed to be warned off by security. I typed and deleted several responses before simply writing, "I already told you I would respect your decision. Enjoy your rehearsal dinner." To shake off the renewed feelings of rejection, I forced myself to leave the apartment. The late afternoon light was breaking through the clouds as I wandered the sloping streets of Montmartre, past artist studios, small galleries, and cafes with chairs facing outward toward the street. I found myself at a small restaurant with tables spilling onto the sidewalk and took a seat, ordering in my rudimentary French. The waiter brought me a glass of wine and a simple meal of coq au vin. As I ate alone, watching Parisians and tourists stream by, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride at navigating a foreign city on my own, lingering hurt from my family's rejection, and a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, no one was watching me, judging me, or comparing themselves to me. I was anonymous in a city of millions. After dinner, I walked to a nearby viewpoint and caught my first glimpse of the Eiffel Tower in the distance, illuminated against the darkening sky. Tears pricked my eyes at its beauty, and I found myself wishing I had someone to share the moment with. The next morning, I set out early to explore. I wandered through the Louvre, marveling at the Mona Lisa, smaller than I'd imagined, and the Venus de Milo. I strolled along the Seine and browsed through the stalls of the bouquinists selling vintage books and prints. By mid-afternoon, I found myself in need of a rest and stopped at a café in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, ordering an espresso and a pain au chocolat. As I people-watched, I noticed a man at a nearby table occasionally glancing my way. He had a camera slung around his neck and was writing in a notebook. Catching me looking, he smiled apologetically. "Pardonnez-moi," he said in French before switching to English with a heavy accent. I did not mean to stare. "I am a photographer, and the light is catching your face in a remarkable way." Under normal circumstances, I might have been put off by a stranger's approach, but something about his professional demeanor and the fact that I was far from home made me less guarded. "It's okay," I said. "I'm a tourist obviously enjoying her first trip to Paris." "American?" he asked, and when I nodded, he introduced himself as Luke, a freelance photographer who specialized in portraiture and fashion. Our conversation flowed easily as he told me about growing up in Paris and his work with various magazines. When I mentioned I was an art teacher, he asked thoughtful questions about how I engaged children with art history. "What brings you to Paris alone?" he eventually asked. Perhaps it was the anonymity of being in a foreign city, or maybe just the need to unburden myself to someone who had no connection to my life, but I found myself telling Luke the whole story: the wedding, the uninvitation, my decision to come anyway. That is, he searched for the right English word, cruel. Family can be the source of our deepest wounds. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother: "Your sister is very upset. She heard from a cousin that you're in Paris and is worried you'll show up tomorrow. Please confirm again you're not coming to the wedding." I showed Luke the message, feeling the hurt resurface. She thinks I have so little dignity that I would crash a wedding I was explicitly uninvited from? And my mother is enabling this paranoia? Luke regarded me thoughtfully. You know what would be a proper response to this situation? Not hiding away. A photoshoot. A photoshoot? I repeated, confused. Yes. You are in the most beautiful city in the world, with incredible light, and you have a story of resilience to tell. Let me photograph you, not in a glamorous, superficial way, but in a way that captures your truth. Your beauty, yes, but also your strength. I laughed nervously. I'm not a model. Everyone has beauty worth capturing, Luke said simply. Think about it. Here is my card. I would do this as an artistic project, no charge. I tucked his card into my wallet, both flattered and uncertain. Back at my apartment that evening, I received more updates about the rehearsal dinner from a cousin who didn't know about my uninvitation. Apparently, Madison was stressed, having arguments with the wedding planner, and had snapped at our mother over the table arrangements. As I sat alone on my small balcony, watching the lights of Paris twinkle around me, I felt a deep sadness settle over me. Tomorrow, my family would gather without me to celebrate a milestone event. I would forever be missing from those photographs, those memories, erased from my own family history because of something as superficial as my appearance. I pulled out Luke's card and ran my finger over the embossed lettering, considering his offer. Was it an act of vanity to want to be photographed? Or was it an act of reclamation? I woke on Saturday, my sister's wedding day, feeling strangely empty. In another reality, I would have been with Madison now, helping her with last-minute preparations, perhaps soothing pre-wedding jitters or adjusting her veil. Instead, I lay alone in a borrowed bed in a foreign city, deliberately excluded from one of the most significant days in my family's life. Rather than wallowing in my apartment, I decided to treat myself to a nice breakfast. I found a charming pâtisserie near the Tuileries garden with outdoor seating and ordered a café crème and a selection of pastries that would have horrified my calorie-counting sister. As I savored my croissant, my phone chimed with Instagram notifications. A distant cousin was posting stories from the wedding preparations, Madison in a monogrammed robe, my mother fussing with flower arrangements, the chateau looking like something from a fairy tale. I should have known better than to look, but I couldn't help myself. One image particularly stabbed at my heart, the family portrait, everyone arranged on the chateau's grand staircase. My parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all smiling in their finery, with Madison radiant in the center. A perfect family photograph with no indication that someone was missing. I had been so thoroughly excised that no one seemed to notice the gap where I should have stood. I set down my phone, feeling tears threaten again. A voice interrupted my thoughts. Too much sugar in the coffee? Looking up, I saw Luke standing beside my table, camera bag slung over his shoulder. No, the coffee is perfect, I managed. Just family drama catching up with me. Ah, the wedding is today? When I nodded, he asked, may I join you? Over a second cup of coffee, I showed him the photos, trying to sound detached despite the pain evident in my voice. You know what I see in these pictures? Luke said after studying them. Fear. Fear? Yes. Your sister's smile is tight. Her knuckles are white where she grips your father's arm. She is afraid that even in her perfect dress, at her perfect venue, on her perfect day, she still won't be enough. He set the phone down. That fear has nothing to do with you, Emma. Nothing at all. His perspective hit me like a revelation. Madison's issues weren't about my appearance, they were about her own insecurities that no amount of external validation could fix. Have you thought about my offer? Luke asked, changing the subject. The photoshoot? I don't know. It feels self-indulgent, he suggested. When I nodded, he continued passionately, this is the problem. You have been taught that celebrating yourself is somehow wrong. That you should hide your light because it might outshine others. This is nonsense. But. No buts. In my work, I have photographed many beautiful women, models, actresses, people who are paid for their appearance. But true beauty, the kind that translates through the camera, comes from authenticity, not features. Your sister can ban you from her wedding, but she cannot ban you from owning your story. His words resonated with something deep inside me, a desire to stop apologizing for simply existing. Okay, I said finally. Let's do it. Luke's face lit up. Magnifique. Do you have something to wear? Something that makes you feel confident? Actually, yes. I thought of the blue dress in my suitcase, the one I'd originally planned to wear as Madison's bridesmaid. We agreed to meet at the Trocadero at sunset, when the light would be perfect for photographs with the Eiffel Tower as a backdrop. I spent the afternoon preparing, taking care with my hair and makeup, not to transform myself, but to enhance the features I'd spent so long downplaying. As I slipped on the blue dress, I was struck by how perfectly it fit, how the color made my eyes seem more vivid. I had bought this dress to stand beside Madison, to complement her without overshadowing her. Now I would wear it for myself. At 7 p.m., I arrived at the Trocadero, nervous but determined. Luke was already there with a young woman he introduced as Sophie, his assistant who would help with lighting. The Eiffel Tower stood majestically behind them, beginning to glow as the sun descended toward the horizon. You look beautiful, Sophie said warmly. Ready? Luke asked. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. Ready. The golden hour light bathed the Trocadero in a warm glow, casting long shadows across the stone terrace and making the Eiffel Tower shimmer in the distance. Tourists milled about, taking selfies and admiring the view, but Luke seemed to know how to find pockets of space that made it seem like we had Paris to ourselves. We'll start simple, he said, adjusting his camera settings. Just stand there and look toward the tower. Don't pose, just be. I felt awkward at first, acutely self-conscious with his camera pointed at me. Years of trying to deflect attention had made me uncomfortable as the deliberate focus. Relax your shoulders, Luke called. Breathe. Remember, this is not about performing beauty. This is about capturing your truth. Sophie moved around us with a reflector, occasionally offering encouraging words. Gradually, I began to relax, focusing on the sensation of the warm evening air, the distant sound of street musicians, the weight of the dress against my skin. Good, now walk toward me, naturally, as if you're just enjoying an evening stroll, Luke directed. As the session continued, I found myself forgetting the camera, instead connecting with the surreal beauty of being in Paris at sunset. Luke had a gift for making me feel at ease, for finding moments of genuine emotion rather than posed artifice. Now let's try something different, he suggested after about 20 minutes. Think about everything that's happened, the rejection, the pain, but also your decision to come anyway. Let all of that show in your face. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the emotions surface, the hurt of Madison's text, the disappointment in my parents, the loneliness of the past few days, but also the small triumphs of navigating Paris alone, the freedom of being answerable only to myself. When I opened my eyes, Luke was capturing shot after shot, murmuring appreciatively. Yes, exactly that. The vulnerability but also the strength. C'est parfait. A small crowd of tourists had stopped to watch, probably assuming I was a model or actress having a professional shoot. Some took their own pictures of the scene, while others whispered speculations about who I might be. Ignore them, Sophie advised, noticing my awareness of the onlookers. Just stay with whatever you're feeling right now. We moved to different spots around the Trocadero, using the architecture, fountains, and changing light to create varied scenes. As the session progressed, I felt a shift happening within me, a shedding of old constraints, a permission to fully occupy my space in the world. The light is changing, Luke noted as the sun dipped lower. Now we get the magic. As if on cue, the Eiffel Tower's lights began to sparkle, eliciting gasps from tourists across the plaza. Luke positioned me with the tower directly behind me, its illuminated form creating a halo effect. Now, Emma, he said quietly, coming closer, I want you to think about what you would say to your sister if she were standing here now. Not in anger, but in honesty. The question caught me off guard, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. I thought about Madison, not the brittle, competitive woman who had banned me from her wedding, but the sister I'd shared a bedroom with for 12 years, who had once taught me to French braid my hair, who had cried with me when our childhood dog died. I would tell her that I love her, I said, my voice catching. That I've never wanted to compete with her. That I wish she could see herself through my eyes instead of always comparing herself to me. That I miss my big sister. The vulnerability of the moment hit me fully, and a tear slid down my cheek. Rather than interrupting to wipe it away, Luke kept shooting, capturing this raw moment of emotion. That's it, he said softly. That's the heart of the story right there. As we continued, a group of young women approached, asking in broken English if I was someone famous. Before I could answer, one asked for a photo with me. Feeling both amused and oddly touched, I agreed, standing between them as Sophie used one of their phones to snap a picture. "What movie are you in?" one asked. "I'm not an actress," I explained. "Just someone with a story." This seemed to intrigue them even more, and soon a small line had formed of people wanting photos with the American in the blue dress against the backdrop of the sparkling tower. Luke watched with amusement. "You see? True beauty draws people in. It's magnetic." By the time we finished, the sky had deepened to indigo, the Eiffel Tower was fully illuminated, and I felt transformed. It wasn't about the photographs themselves, though I was eager to see them, but about the experience of being fully seen, of expressing my complete self without apology or diminishment. As we packed up Luke's equipment, he said, "There is a French expression, pour être irréplaçable, Illinois faut être différent. To be irreplaceable, one must be different. Your sister may have the fancy wedding today, but you have something she never will, the courage to be authentically yourself." Walking back to the metro station, I realized I hadn't thought about Madison's actual wedding ceremony once during the entire photoshoot. For those hours, I had been fully present in my own experience rather than dwelling on my exclusion from hers. Sophie hugged me goodbye at the station. "Luke will send you some previews tonight," she promised. "They're going to be stunning." On the metro ride back to my apartment, I gazed at my reflection in the train window, seeing myself with new eyes, not as the girl who had to make herself smaller to accommodate others' insecurities, but as a woman who had faced rejection and chosen to create something beautiful from it. Back at my apartment, I showered and changed into comfortable clothes, the emotional and physical intensity of the photoshoot leaving me pleasantly exhausted. Around midnight, my phone pinged with an email from Luke containing a link to a gallery of preview images. With nervous anticipation, I clicked the link. The photos loaded one by one, and I gasped at what I saw. Luke had captured something I'd never seen in myself before, a luminous quality that went beyond physical features to something deeper, more essential. There I was against the Paris sunset, looking straight into the camera with tears in my eyes, vulnerability and strength coexisting in my expression. In another shot, I was laughing with the Eiffel Tower sparkling behind me, looking completely free. Without overthinking it, I selected one of the images, me gazing at the Eiffel Tower with a complex expression of wistfulness and joy, and posted it to Instagram with a caption I typed quickly. "Today my sister got married in a French chateau. I wasn't there because she uninvited me, saying my presence would distract from her as the bride. So instead, I had my own Paris moment." Sometimes rejection leads you exactly where you need to be. #myParisStory. I set my phone down and went to bed, emotionally drained but somehow lighter than I'd felt in years. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing incessantly. Blinking sleep from my eyes, I picked it up to find hundreds of notifications flooding in, thousands of likes on my post, hundreds of comments, direct messages, and follow requests. My follower count, usually hovering around 300 friends and acquaintances, had jumped overnight to several thousand and was climbing by the minute. "What on earth?" I murmured, scrolling through comments expressing outrage on my behalf, sharing similar stories of family rejection, and complimenting both the photograph and my resilience. My phone rang, Jasmine calling from home. "Emma, your post has gone viral. It's being shared in all these women's groups and on Twitter. Everyone's talking about it." That can't be right, I said, disbelieving. But as we spoke, the notifications continued to pour in. A text came through from Luke, "Your post is everywhere. I've received dozens of inquiries about the photos." This has struck a chord with many people. By afternoon, my post had been shared tens of thousands of times across multiple platforms. Several women's magazines had reposted it with headlines like "Woman Banned from Sister's Wedding for Being Too Pretty Has Epic Paris Photoshoot Instead" and "The Ultimate Revenge, Turning Wedding Rejection into Viral Empowerment." I was equal parts overwhelmed and bewildered by the attention. What had been a personal moment of reclamation had somehow resonated with thousands of strangers who saw in my story something universal: the experience of being diminished, of being told to make yourself smaller to accommodate others' insecurities, and the liberating power of refusing to do so. Then came the call I'd been dreading. Madison's name flashed on my screen as my phone rang around 3 p.m. Paris time. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "How could you?" she hissed without preamble. "My wedding was yesterday and somehow you've made everything about you again." "Madison, People are messaging me. Asking if I'm the jealous sister from that viral post. Richard's family is mortified. You've ruined everything." "I didn't use your name," I said quietly. "I didn't tag you. I didn't even mention where in France the wedding was. I just shared my own experience." "Your experience?" she spat. "You're loving this attention. Admit it. You couldn't stand that I was having one day where I was the special one, so you had to create this pity party for yourself." Her words stung, but not as deeply as they once would have. The photo shoot had changed something fundamental in how I saw myself and our relationship. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said calmly. "But I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to heal myself." "Oh, spare me," Madison began, but was interrupted by what sounded like our mother taking the phone. "Emma," my mother said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Your father and I are very disappointed. We raised you better than to air family disagreements publicly." The familiar weight of parental disapproval settled on my shoulders, but this time, I refused to accept it as my burden to carry. "You raised me to step aside whenever Madison felt threatened by me," I replied. "You raised me to believe that my value was tied to how well I could diminish myself to make others comfortable. I'm learning that those weren't good lessons, Mom." There was a long pause before my mother spoke again, her voice softer. "You always were the stubborn one." Another pause. "The pictures are beautiful, though." It wasn't an apology or even a direct acknowledgement of the wrong they'd done, but from my mother, it was something. My father called separately that evening, his voice gruff with emotion. "Your mother doesn't know I'm calling," he said. I wanted to say, "Well, I'm sorry, Emma. We should have stood up for you. And for what it's worth, I think what you did took courage." As the day progressed, the viral spread continued. By evening, my post had reached over 1 million views, and by the following morning, it had surpassed 4 million. News websites picked up the story, and I received interview requests from morning shows and podcasts. Even more unexpected was an email from a modeling agency based in New York. "We were struck by the authenticity and presence you display in these images. We'd be interested in discussing representation for editorial work if that might interest you." My first instinct was to laugh, me, a middle school art teacher, modeling at 29? But the invitation represented something significant, external validation of the truth I was just beginning to accept about myself. My beauty wasn't something to apologize for or hide. It was simply one aspect of who I was, neither the most important nor something to be ashamed of. Perhaps most touching were the messages from women sharing similar experiences, sisters who had been excluded from family events, daughters who had been criticized for drawing too much attention, women who had spent years making themselves smaller to avoid accusations of vanity. One message particularly moved me: "I've spent my entire life apologizing for taking up space. Your post made me realize I've been answering for a crime I never committed. Thank you for showing what it looks like to reclaim your right to exist fully." Luke called to let me know he too was being inundated with requests for interviews, for similar photoshoots, for collaborations. Your story has resonated because it's about something much bigger than one wedding or one family conflict, he said. It's about the broader experience of women being punished for attributes they neither chose nor can change, and the revolutionary act of refusing that punishment. As my last day in Paris dawned and the viral storm continued to swirl, I found myself sitting at the same cafe where I'd met Luke, reflecting on how differently this trip had turned out from what I'd expected. I had come to Paris heartbroken and rejected, seeking only a consolation prize for missing my sister's wedding. Instead, I had found a new way of seeing myself and my place in the world, one that didn't require shrinking to accommodate others' insecurities. 1 month after returning home, I was still adjusting to the ripples from my viral moment. The initial frenzy had died down, but the impact on my life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. My middle school classroom now featured a framed print of the Eiffel Tower, a gift from my students, who had followed my Paris adventure with enthusiasm. Ms. Kennedy went viral for being too pretty, I'd overheard one explain to a substitute teacher, causing me equal parts embarrassment and amusement. The most significant change was internal. I walked differently now, spoke more confidently, and no longer felt the need to apologize for simply existing. This new self-assurance translated into my teaching as well. I found myself more effective at engaging students and advocating for resources for our art program. To my surprise, I had accepted the modeling agency's offer, not to pursue a full-time career change, but to do occasional editorial work during school breaks. My first shoot for a women's magazine feature on real beauty had been both terrifying and exhilarating. The article, focusing on women who had overcome beauty-related trauma or discrimination, allowed me to tell my story in my own words. Luke and I stayed in regular contact. He had used our shoot to launch a new portfolio series called Reclamation, featuring women embracing their authentic selves after various forms of rejection. He always credited me as his inspiration, and we were discussing a potential collaboration during my summer break. The most complex changes involved my family. After 2 weeks of silence following my return, my mother had called to invite me to Sunday dinner. "It's time we all talked," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Walking into my parents' house that Sunday was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Madison and Richard were there too, back from their honeymoon in the Maldives. The tension was palpable as we awkwardly navigated pre-dinner small talk. It was during dessert that Madison finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I saw your modeling photos," she said, pushing her cake around on her plate without eating it. I tensed, waiting for the criticism. "You look happy," she continued, surprising me. "I don't think I've ever looked that happy in any photo." The vulnerability in her voice cracked something open in the room. "I've never wanted to compete with you, Madison," I said quietly. "Never." "I know," she admitted, still not meeting my eyes. "That almost made it worse, you know? You weren't even trying, and still." She trailed off. My mother cleared her throat. "I think we all have some things to acknowledge," she said. "Your father and we didn't handle things well. We thought we were keeping peace in the family, but really, we were enabling patterns that have hurt both of you." My father, never one for emotional conversations, reached over and patted my hand awkwardly. "We're proud of you, Emma. Should have said it more over the years." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Madison didn't explicitly apologize for uninviting me from the wedding, and I still felt the sting of that rejection. But it was a beginning, the first honest conversation our family had had in years. In the weeks that followed, Madison and I began tentatively rebuilding our relationship, meeting for occasional coffees where we talked about everything except appearances. I learned about her honeymoon and her new project at work. She asked about my students and seemed genuinely interested in my teaching methods. There was a long road ahead, but for the first time, I felt we might actually find our way to being real sisters instead of competitors. Setting boundaries was a crucial part of this new chapter. I was clear with my family about what I would and wouldn't accept going forward: no more comments about my appearance, no more expectations that I would diminish myself to soothe others' insecurities, no more enabling of toxic dynamics. My friendship with Luke evolved too. Our collaboration was strictly professional, but he had become an important part of my support network, someone who had seen me at both my most vulnerable and my most empowered, and who had helped me bridge that gap. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he said during one of our video calls. "Not the photos themselves, beautiful as they are, but the fact that you used a painful rejection as a catalyst for growth instead of an excuse for bitterness." As summer approached, I made plans for another solo trip, this time to Italy, a place I'd always wanted to explore. But unlike my Paris journey, this one wouldn't be born from rejection or pain. It would be a deliberate choice to continue expanding my world, to keep stepping fully into my life without apology. Looking back at how far I'd come since that devastating text message, I realized that Madison had inadvertently given me a precious gift. In trying to exclude me from her story, she had forced me to fully claim my own. Sometimes the most painful rejections lead us exactly where we need to be. I hope my story has resonated with those of you who have felt diminished, excluded, or asked to make yourself smaller to accommodate others' insecurities. Remember that you deserve to take up space in this world, all of you, without apology or permission. If my journey has touched you in any way, please hit the like button and subscribe to join me for more stories of transformation. I'd love to hear in the comments about a time when rejection eventually led you somewhere beautiful, your own Eiffel Tower moment. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this video with them. Thank you for witnessing my story, and until next time, remember, sometimes being banned from where you thought you belonged is the first step to finding where you truly do.